What is going on, everyone? JP MMA here, back with a brand new video. Today we are going to be matchmaking the lightweight division. There's a ton of matchups to be made. All of these guys, we're going to be going over 8 of the top 10 guys. The champ, Islam. We got Charles, Arman Tsarukyan, Max Holloway, Dustin Poirier, Ilia Topuria moving up to lightweight, Justin Gaethje, and Dan Hooker. We got a ton of matchups to be made. None of these guys have fights booked right now. There's been a lot of talk of who to match up who's getting the next title fight, who is Ilia going to face in his lightweight debut. A ton of questions, and I'm going to try to be answering those questions today. So let's get straight into it, starting with the next title fight. Who is going to fight Islam Makhachev? We see Dana talking about potentially Justin Gaethje getting a title shot off of that win versus Rafael Fiziev. I don't like that. I don't think anybody likes that. We've been kind of doing this game where the same guys, Dustin Poirier gets one win over Benoit Saint-Denis, and he gets a title shot versus Islam Makhachev. And now we could potentially see the same thing with Gaethje. I don't like that. I mean, yeah, they're coming off a win, but they're not on any big win streaks, not even multiple fights at this point. We can't keep doing the same song and dance where these guys get one win over a guy. Fiziev was number 10. Benoit Saint-Denis wasn't even top 5. And go straight into a title shot versus Islam Makhachev. And they're going to lose. I mean, we know they're going to lose. Islam's one of the greatest of all time. I don't think they're going to pose much of a threat, especially with Islam's grappling. So I don't like the Gaethje fight versus Islam. I want to do the Arman Tsarukyan fight versus Islam Makhachev for the next title fight at lightweight. Yes, Arman pulled out. We had the fight booked for UFC 311 this year. Arman pulls out. Moicano steps in. I know that people don't like giving guys title shots right after they pull out of the title fight. I know especially Dana doesn't like stuff like that, but Tsarukyan's the clearest guy to give Makhachev at this point. I think he poses the biggest threat aside of Ilia Topuria, and apparently Islam has declined that Ilia Topuria fight. We kind of have a lot of guys saying, I don't want to fight this guy, I don't want to fight that guy. I really don't want to go along with those narratives. I want to just match guys up with who I think is the best matchup, and if they happen, they happen. But things like Islam declining Ilia and Charles declining Ilia, unless it's for the belt. I mean, come on, like, you're top 5 in the UFC. Dana always says the best fight the best. I mean, how much leeway can we give these guys where they say, I don't want to fight this guy? Let's get the fight done. So I like Arman versus Islam. There it is. Like I just said, we had the fight booked for UFC 311. He poses the biggest threat at lightweight aside from Ilia Topuria. He deserves it the most at lightweight aside from Ilia Topuria. He's coming off of a win versus Charles Oliveira. He's the number 1 ranked contender. He's on a big win streak, and his only, what does he have, 2 losses in the UFC, one of them being to a very competitive fight in his debut versus Islam Makhachev. I mean, your debut versus Islam Makhachev. I can't think of a tougher fight, and he was still competitive in that fight, went the 3-round distance. Now he's on a win streak, just beat Charles Oliveira. We were kind of saying with the Dricus situation how he just KOs Robert Whittaker, and we were talking about him potentially not getting a title shot. And it's like, in what way do you KO Robert Whittaker, are a top 3 contender, and are still not getting a title shot? That should never be happening with the way that guys like Charles Oliveira and Robert Whittaker have been at the top of the division for that long. If you're beating these guys, you should be getting a title shot. And he did get one booked, but he pulled out. It is what it is. He was hurt. He was unable to walk, really. It's not like he got scared and he pulled out. It really wasn't his fault. I know people, you're still going to take the blame for pulling out, but it's not like he didn't want to fight. It's not like he was good to go and he mentally wasn't there. He physically couldn't fight. He's the most deserving at lightweight, and I think this will be the most competitive fight aside from Ilia Topuria. So I want to see Arman versus Islam for the next title fight. I don't really see any other option besides the Ilia fight, which I just don't think is going to be made right now. I think they would have already announced it. That would be a super fight. Maybe a little too good to be true, but we'll see in the future. Next fight, Charles' next opponent. I like Ilia Topuria for it. I know Charles has said that he doesn't want to fight Ilia Topuria unless it's for the belt. I mean, this is the fight to make. This is such a sick fight. You have Charles Oliveira, one of the best lightweights of all time, one of the best finishers of all time, versus Ilia Topuria, who has unmatched aura right now, some of the best knockout power in the UFC, coming off of KOs of Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski, two of the best featherweights of all time. I don't mind moving up to lightweight. He's beaten the top two guys at featherweight of all time by knockout, back to back. So, you could say there's really nothing left for him to do. Kind of seems like he's taking the path of Conor, beating the best at the division, not really defending too many times, and then moving up for a big money fight and more legacy, it seems like. So, I want to see the Islam fight, but I guess they're not going to do that. So I think the perfect guy is Charles Oliveira. And if he beats Charles Oliveira, I mean, obviously he should be getting the shot versus Islam, unless Islam wants to move up. That'll be an absolute one of the biggest fights, if not the biggest UFC fight of all time. Two of the greatest. I mean, Ilia seems like he's on the path to a top 10 fighter of all time, and Islam's already there. So, fighting another top lightweight of all time of Charles Oliveira. Like I said, Ilia Topuria only has super fights in his future. Charles Oliveira, Islam Makhachev, anybody with a big name is going to be a huge fight for Ilia Topuria, and if he beats Charles, again, it's just going to be insane. I would probably pick him to beat Charles. I mean, he's got the power advantage, but who knows how he's going to do versus these lightweights. We saw him get dropped by Jai Herbert at lightweight, and that was one of his only lightweight fights in his career. So obviously he's improved much since then, and he's beaten some of the best fighters of all time. So I'd probably lean Ilia Topuria in this fight, and I really hope that they get this done. Ilia's hinting at some crazy fight that we're not going to be expecting. So I would like for it to be Charles or Islam. I feel like we're not going to get Islam, so I'm going with Charles. Next fight, DP versus Max Holloway. Yes, this is a rematch, but at this point, guys like Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje and Charles and even Michael Chandler, they're going to be rematching everybody. I mean, they've been fighting each other, that little circle of fighters, forever now. Charles has fought in Chandler, he's fought in Gaethje, he's fought in Poirier, Poirier's fought in Gaethje, he's fought in Michael Chandler. You know what I mean? So, and they've all fought in Max Holloway as well. So it's kind of in that little circle of fighters. It is what it is. That rematch, or that first fight, happened a good amount ago. I think it's a more fresher matchup now. Dustin Poirier still looks to be in his prime, even though he's close to retirement. It looks like this is going to be his potentially last fight, his retirement fight in Louisiana. He said he wants it to be a legend. Max Holloway is certainly a legend. And the fact that, they did already fight before, but it was for a title fight, interim fight, I believe. A competitive fight nonetheless, and Max Holloway seems to be doing well at lightweight, looking at his performance with Justin Gaethje. Yes, he's coming off a knockout versus Ilia Topuria. That was at featherweight. Everybody's getting knocked out by Ilia as of right now. I think moving up to lightweight is the right decision for Max. And I think this is going to be a really good scrap and a really fun fight for Dustin Poirier's retirement, where this could really go either way. So a battle between two legends for DP's retirement fight. I'd really like to see this. And honestly, I think Charles and Dustin's opponents are interchangeable. I wouldn't mind the rematch of Charles Oliveira versus Max Holloway. They fought way back in their UFC careers, and Charles lost with an injury, I think, to the ribs or something like that. It was a weird stoppage, an injury TKO, you could call it. So not really definitely wasn't a true fight, and showed how good those guys really were. And this would be basically a fresh matchup. I mean, that fight really didn't happen. They were both so young, and it was a weird finish. Charles versus Holloway would be a sick fight nonetheless. And then you could do Topuria versus DP. The only thing I will say is, I don't know if I want to see DP versus Ilya. Like, I'd be scared for DP, especially in his retirement. I don't want to see him get knocked out, and I feel like that could definitely happen versus Ilya. Like I said, Ilya has just money fights, huge fights in his future. Anyone he fights next is going to be a huge fight, so I feel like those two opponents are interchangeable for Charles and DP. The last fight we're going to be going over is Gaethje versus Hooker. This fight was originally booked for UFC 313, didn't happen. Dan Hooker pulls out, Fiziev steps in. We got a banger of Gaethje versus Fiziev in the rematch. So I want to see Hooker step in there versus Gaethje like they were supposed to the first time. This is a fresh matchup, which is we're pretty lucky to get, given these names. Like I just said, Gaethje, that group of guys, they've all fought in each other before, so to get a fresh matchup with Gaethje and Hooker is a nice little treat. And we are expecting that fight to be very, very violent, and of course we still are. Gaethje versus Hooker should be bloody. It should be a war. We could certainly see a knockout, and with the resurgence of Dan Hooker's career, coming off wins of Jalen Turner, Mateusz Gamrot, and Gaethje coming off a win versus Fiziev, I think the stakes are a little bit higher than they could have been. And if Gaethje beats Dan Hooker, or even if Dan Hooker beats Gaethje, they could be the number one contender, considering what happens to Charles if he loses. The winner of this fight could get a title shot. Dana likes to give title shots willy-nilly in this division, so I wouldn't be surprised if the winner of this got a title shot. And I feel like every fight that I've match made is going to be a war. Islam versus Saryukin should be one of the most high-level fights we've ever seen. Charles versus Ilia Topuria is one of the biggest fights we've ever seen. That's almost certain to result in a finish. And another absurdly high-skilled fight. And we got Poirier versus Holloway, the only rematch besides Saryukin Islam that I've made on this video. And this is going to be a war. A bunch of strikes landed. DP's retirement fight, two legends. And then we got Gaethje Hooker, both guys coming off of wins, a fresh matchup, and probably the most violent out of all these four fights. So those are my matchups to make for this lightweight division. A ton of questions to be answered. Nobody has a fight lined up. We're kind of waiting. Islam fought in January. Gaethje just fought. So, Gaethje and Hooker, I don't expect their fight to be announced anytime soon, but I feel like that's the fight to make. Charles doesn't really fight anymore. I don't know what's up with him. He fights like once a year at this point. He's coming off a win in the rematch versus Chandler. That was a weird fight. Probably shouldn't have even been booked, but he's coming off the win. Lost to Arman before that. We're waiting for this Ilya. I don't know who's Ilya's opponent's going to be. He keeps hinting at it, tweeting stuff. It's got to be, I wouldn't be surprised if 2 or 3 of these fights were on International Fight Week. I'm expecting probably Ilya's fight to be on International Fight Week, either versus Islam or Charles, or potentially Dustin Poirier at the very least. So, yes, all 4 of these fights should be made within this year of 2025. Extremely hyped for all of them. Let me know what you guys think. All these fights should be very violent, very high skilled, and very important to the future of this lightweight division. Let me know what fights you guys would make for these guys in the lightweight division, and that will be all for me.